Hey everybody, I am Chuck Reece, the editor-in-chief of Salvation South, and we're so glad to be here with you tonight. I'm so happy I don't know what to do with myself because my guest tonight is the co-founder of the Music Maker Foundation, which has been doing great work, which we're going to tell you about. Among and for musicians for a long time now, over 25 years. And how many years has it been now, Tim?
Going on 28, I think now, or 27 or 28. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But I was doing this work, that's when I got formed, but 30 years easily that I've been working with this group of musicians.
Well, before long, you'll be celebrating 30 years. So that's great. Well, I want to start by talking about how you do it because, I've read a lot about, how you do your work, and I read on your website that your basic method is built around two obsessions. Okay. And the first one is this insatiable desire to search out the unheard musicians who keep American musical institutions alive. Right. And the second one is this desire for equity for those musicians, your need to make sure the work of your partner musicians lives on for future generations and that poverty doesn't crush them. So the first part of that is actually finding the musicians who need help, and specifically you say unheard musicians. Now, so let's talk a little bit about how that process works, how you find people. And
well, usually one musician to another. In 1989 or 91, I met guitar Gabriel in Winston-Salem, and just finding him was hard because no one would take me to the section of the area of Winston-Salem where he lives. So, there was big signs in his neighborhood. You are entering an occupied territory, and you can be pulled over by anybody, like, police watch. And so no one would go in there. But so you have to go into places that aren't like most people don't go. White people don't go, in that section of town. And so, once I got in there and would meet people and heard about like drink houses, the doors would be slammed in my face because they thought I was a cop, right? What the hell was I doing there? And then, that I knew some guitar chords and knew other blues musicians, I'd be let in the door. And once they figured out I wasn't a cop, I met Gabe, and who soon introduced me to 12 incredible artists that were just outstanding. And from that core group of artists, we've helped over close to 700 artists to this day. And wow. I've met some wonderful musicians. And now your radar gets kind of good I was trained as a folk life field worker, and I have an ear for music. Someone just wrote an email a couple of months ago about Lowdown Brown from Houston, Texas, and wrote a wonderful email about him. We checked him online. His music was amazing. We called him up, and he was just a real gentleman. And he said he wanted to partner with us to do anything. Next thing we know, we're booked him at the Telluride Blues and Brews Festival that's coming up next year, or later this year in September, October, when that is. And so that's kind of the fastest I've ever really worked. But that's in time of COVID, you really can't really meet people like you can.
right.
But it's mostly going into communities and having an ear for music, and you find the greatest musician and they'll tell you something. There's something Guitar Gabriel taught me about field work I've always thought was true. If you go into a small southern town, you don't want to talk to a banker or a lawyer or anyone of any note. You want to find the wino under the bridge or someone that's on the outcast and talk to them. And they have nothing to lose. And they'll tell you everything you need to know if you treat them as a human being. And I found that to be true.
That's pretty incredible. And you were talking a second ago about meeting one musician through meeting another. This record you guys recently collaborated on with the Bible and Tara Recording Company out of Memphis.
Example.
Yeah, it is this great compilation of sacred soul music, and it happened because now, if I tell this story wrong, please correct me, but you went over there to work with Freeman Vines in Eastern North Carolina.
Yeah, the guy's guitars. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he introduced you to his sisters, who had a singing group called the
Glorifying Vines.
Glorifying Vine Sisters. Yeah, I was forgetting the adjective there, but they, and then they in turn introduce you to so many of these other groups who live right around where they do in Eastern North Carolina, all in these tiny rural communities.
I went to a gospel singing she did 2 years in a row, and every group was so spectacular. When Bruce decided to come up, I just said, we elected Alice to be our musical director. We didn't question her or ask her who she was going to bring. We knew she had exquisite taste and we could just trust Alice. She was a true partner, so that was her job. And everyone she brought, there was over 40 musicians all in all with the side musicians, and they're all just outstanding. And that was because Alice knew everybody, introduced us to the community, and she got what we were about. She was a badass musician, wanted the best musicians to represent their community.
Although she wouldn't use that language to call herself that.
Oh no, that's all right.
But okay, the second part of this you guys said is this desire you have for equity. You need to make sure that these musicians you're talking about, that their music lives on for future generations through recording, and that poverty doesn't crush them over time. And how do you go about that work?
Well, let's talk about equity. We call it cultural equity. And like you listen to the radio or turn on the TV, all that music you hear is bought and paid for. There's lots of money that went into making the records, doing A&R, buying the ads, publicists, the whole thing. But at the roots of that, roots musicians, they have no budget for that stuff. So there's no playing field for them. So if we can even get them recorded and heard, that's some equity there. And then also there's something that is something about being seen, having a community felt they're being seen is super important. Oh, sorry. Because my teacher, Alan Lomax, always had a great example when he went down, I believe it was in Haiti for the first time. It was a hard time finding folk music. And so he brought this huge, his tape recorder weighed 30 pounds. The speakers were 100 pounds a piece. And he went in and recorded these artists and set up the speakers, and the whole community got together and he played back the recordings right then for the community. Jump ahead 5 years later, Alan went back. Folk music was being played throughout Haiti because someone said, oh, somebody noticed. And that's what, it takes, I think, even with this sacred soul, it's just a way to elevate the music in the community because the kids are always watching. and there's always one kid watching the old folks. Perfect example would be the Carolina Chocolate Drops. There was one
Right.
old black fiddler left, and a bunch of
Mhm.
young black kids saw him, learned his repertoire, and won a Grammy.
Right.
You know, there it is. That's cultural equity.
Hmm. Well, you should know that one of your fans, Aunt Daniels, just chimed in and said, "Tim, you are the greatest. Thank you for all you do."
Oh, yeah. Well, we love
And
Amp. He's a musical genius too, of that long line of the Daniels family, and he's the leader of the Dedicated Men of Zion. He has a great new record coming out, and he has a studio in Farmville that we're involved in trying to rehab, so the community there can get together and rehearse during these crazy times.
yeah, and Amp, let me say while I got you here, I'm a giant fan too. Y'all's music just shakes me to my core. We want to take a minute here before we go any further and welcome all the viewers who have joined us for this. And you can use the comment function here on Zoom to tell us where you're watching from. And we would like you, if you can, to share the video link so others can see this wherever they may be. And I'll be reminding you to do that several times as we continue. Lee Gabriels from the Netherlands says, "I'll never forget my first meeting with you and those great musicians, Blues Passion to Cognac, or in Cognac, France, and also in Belgium, Swing Velspiglier. I don't know how to pronounce that. 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Thanks for your good work."
Oh, thank you. The Europeans have been champions of Black music since the creation of Black music, and music makers have been beloved over there, and we've toured for all over and sold a lot of records and had a lot of fans, and we missed that COVID going over there, but we just can't say enough for France and England and Europe what they did for our culture. And they actually, the British invaders brought it back to us, but they love roots music in Europe. They're huge fans.
That was the first thing I ever heard was from a musician friend of mine when I was in college, who went over to visit the UK and over on the continent. And he was like, "They are nuts for our music over there." And
they know it better than we do.
Yeah, they do. Well, let me talk a little bit more about the Unheard musicians. Like, I guess the way, I think about there's been a few, new musicians that you've picked up over the last year or so. I think about the harmonica player called Sugar Harp, Charles Burroughs. And, when somebody like that comes into the family, how do you make them feel part of the Music Maker family?
The easiest way is like with Charles Burroughs is to go to an event together. We used to be a lot more, but we took Sugar Harp to Telluride, and there was a bunch of musicians, and my brother Sam was there, cooking for everybody, and there was a guitar player from Atlanta, and drummer from a group of 7 guys from the Southeast, and they just got to hang out, and they get to just play and enjoy and get to meet each other. Because you got to remember, a lot of these guys holding on to this music in their communities, a lot of much more popular music, is happening. Most people are doing maybe rap or R&B, but doing old country blues. So when they meet someone else that looks like them, that loves this music, they become like a family. And so that's one way we take them in. And we just learn, hey, do we all get along? Then we have a social worker at Music Maker. If the artist is interested, we do an intake interview, and we figure out what their situation is, and what their financial situation is, and what's their living situation is, and we find out a lot of things. The average income of a lot of our artists is $7,000 to $9,000 a year. And so you're dealing with food insecurity, not taking prescription medicines, real deal hard poverty stuff. And so then we can navigate on how we perhaps can help that. We have a sustenance program where we give artists a monthly, maybe $100 or $200 a month to need to help with food or prescription medicine. During the COVID, a lot of our artists made another $5,000 to $7,000 a year performing locally. So that was almost double their income, and that's all been taken away. So you're living on half your income, and is down. So we've had a COVID relief program. In the middle of the month, we send out a check. We started it for 3 months, didn't know where this COVID was going on. We haven't stopped it yet. We're still going strong. We've raised enough money, I think, till June to keep that going. So,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's just what we can do. And of course, the first thing everyone says is, can I get a gig? People want a hand up, not a handout. And and that, before COVID, we were doing over 150 shows a year. And so now we don't even know what's happening with that now. So we've had to scale back, because when the world gets right, we'll know better. I'll have better answers for you.
Yeah. And you have the additional worry of keeping these musicians safe when they're on the road, and because of their age, many of them are quite vulnerable.
I've traveled Europe, my brother Sam and other partners. It's like traveling with a group of your grandparents. Your people from 75 to 85, and you have a group of 7 of them, and you're doing a 7-country tour of Europe, or going down to Argentina, going up to Telluride. So you have to just be real calm and careful. We're very good at that. We do our best.
Okay. Well, and we've got a shout out from Lowdown Brown himself and his friend Jennifer.
Talking about him.
To say hey from Houston.
I was pitching. Taj Mahal was pitching him tracks to learn. We're about to do a record later this year, and
that's all right.
Yeah.
Now I want to talk about, and I want to encourage everybody who's here. Now we've got about a dozen plus viewers, and whatever questions you want to ask Tim, just put them in the chat. I think it's called something else on your side, but put them in there, and we'd be happy to pass them along to Tim. Now, I want to talk about carrying on the work in the future. And, one time, a few years ago, on the occasion of your 25th anniversary, I did a long story about how all this came to be, and but I look at it now, and looking at what I learned about Music Maker back then, and the additional information I've gathered about it now, is and then you factor in this pandemic that we're now in the 3rd year of. It makes me wonder sometimes, it's like how it can be sustained. I understand the fact that you're never going to stop. Y'all are always going to do the best you can to fulfill the needs that are out there. but how do you intend to, keep, let's say first, the discovery of musicians rolling in the future?
Discovering musicians?
Yeah, let's start with that, and then we'll talk about
the musicians. The blues will never die. American roots music will never die. We systematically we did away with drumming in the American South. Didn't do away with it during slavery in South America or Brazil, but we still have it. It's a spirit. Music. The music that was created in the American South acts as the aquifer for all world popular music, and will never stop doing so. And it's always, the aquifer is at the absolute roots and communities of people you'll never know or never seen. They're never known or never seen because no one talks about them, but they're still feeding everything you hear. Snoop Dogg,
right.
Everything comes from these little churches, from little communities, from grandmas or grandpas. That's just a fact that will never stop. As for Music Maker as an organization going forward, we're in process of doing succession planning, but I think during the COVID, as a founder and a visionary founder of this organization, we do way too much that's beyond our resources to do. So we do a lot of little things, and over a bunch of years, we get pretty good at some of them. But with COVID having to cut out some things, we've gotten a lot better at other things, like communicating our message. Now we're turning our focus to recording. Like we met Lowdown here. We're going to get them in the studio. We have we're focusing on our releases better that come out every year. Our listener circle, people donate $300. They get a new CD, every 3 months, and we're recording our next year's now, for ahead of time. We have exhibitions that go on, to museums and cultural centers, so we can create those. We just met with the University of North Carolina Press. We're going to do a Sacred Soul book. And so that's a lot of what we do is education.
Right.
And so we focus on that. So going forward, I just think we're just going to have to figure out how to get bigger and staff up and and raise the money and do all these programs better.
Right. Right.
And it might not be me, and hopefully it's someone else a lot smarter than me that can take what we've done.
Well,
push it out
I don't know about that. I don't know about somebody smarter than you, but anyway, Lee Gabriels asks if you're coming with Mr. Robert Finley to the Moulin Blues Festival this year.
No, I don't know, but that's a perfect example of Robert, when I met him, was playing on the streets of Helena, and was just going blind. And now, through just, who I know and him being such a great voice and a great musician, did a great record with Big Legal Mess. And then Dan Auerbach has done 2 records with him. Now he's touring the world. How many more people like Robert out there? That was just one field trip I did for a weekend 3 or 4 years ago. God bless Robert. I wish I was out there with him. I know his tour got canceled. He's going to come to my hometown, and I was going to go see him, but his band members got COVID, so they had to cut that short. So hopefully that mess will ease up so we can travel in Europe.
Yeah. I know that, if the method that y'all have is by meeting musicians one through another, I know that the whole thing got started with your search for a guy called Guitar Gabriel.
Yeah.
And you heard about him. What was the gentleman's name who told you about him?
Slim.
Guitar Slim. And he told you, if I get this wrong, tell me, that you'll never understand the blues until you find Guitar Gabriel,
Yeah,
right?
that's what he told me. If I want to continue on learning, yeah.
Well, tell me how that search went on.
Well, it was true because I'm a hillbilly, and I was studying hillbilly music when I met Slim, and he taught me how to play this Piedmont blues style, and then Guitar Gabriel. I was in Winston, and no one would take me to his place, so I started substitute teaching, and I would take any gig in the inner city schools. I don't know if you believe in premonition, but I had premonition. I was going to meet Gabe one morning, and the phone rang. And principal called and said, "You come substitute teach," and it was right in where I wanted to go. And I asked my homeroom students if they knew Gabe, and one little girl said, "No, he got cut up. He was killed." And another one said he was burned in a house fire, and another one said, "No, he's my next door neighbor," and drove me a map to a drink house. And I went and met him later that afternoon. And I think I didn't go back to teaching school. Like a couple of weeks later, I stopped that. I was playing King. I was Gabe's chauffeur driving them to all these juke joints, drink houses, and I was making more money in the black juke joints than I was teaching at the public school.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you guys spent a long, long time together, right?
Yeah, we spent, and it's sad, like I met him in 91, and we were daily companions till he passed in 94. But Gabe was a guy who thought very much about his life, and he was a brilliant guy. And him helped me really come up with the whole basis of music maker. Um, and he had a lot of great things, but you have to learn how to trust each other. And the color of your skin doesn't mean anything. We have to get closer together, not farther apart. And his whole thing is, how do we get people together? We have to learn to love one another. This is a guy who had witnessed a lynching, you know, and so I was always amazed when I meet people that had lived through such awful things growing up, and taking that to another level, saying, not hating Whitey for the rest of his life because they did that to someone in my community, but learning how to take a young white brother in and learn how to love each other, and love the blues, and get this music heard and work together. So that's, and try to figure out the intricacies of all our cultural differences, and it's a journey.
Yeah, and it's a long journey. We are our audience is growing by the minute, and I want to remind all of you that if you've got questions, all you have to do is to put them in the appropriate box at the bottom of your screen, the comment box, I believe it's called, and we'll make sure that Tim answers them for you. And we also got a lot of people just saying hello, Tim, like Ryan Lee Crosby's one of them. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah. And, let me, the thing that I got fascinated after I began to spend more time with you is like how many amazing stories there are. Like you said that Gabe introduced you to 12 other musicians. Is that the right number? And every one of them has a fantastic story.
Amazing people.
Yeah.
Mr. Q used to roommate with Art Tatum. Who do you know roommate with Art Tatum? One of the great jazz giants ever.
Right.
Willa Mae Buckner traveled around with 50 snakes in a car and was a snake handler. And a background dancer with Ma Rainey. Who else do you know dance with Ma Rainey?
Right.
Mike Hayes, uh, my deepest friend, no one could understand a word he said. He sang a deep, oh, there's Willa May. And yeah, Michael Vine Hayes, just the most lovely guy, just always laughed all the time. Or Preston Fulp, who played square dances, where you play community gatherings. On one side would be white people. He would play hillbilly music and play the fiddle and turn around and play blues for the black folks, you know, between sets. I mean, just America, you know, a point of you know, hearing stories of America that it seems forgotten, but it's still there, you know. But those people, amazing lives.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about, you know, kind of the folk music that you guys have collected over the years. I know that the foundation is known mostly for its work with blues artists, but
Oh yeah,
there are a lot of folk musicians you've worked with. In fact, when you and Denise first came back to North Carolina, there was a fiddler that you guys lived with for a while,
yeah. We
right?
lived with Samuel Turner Stevens. Is
Uh-huh.
a real old mountain man, and as a kid, he was the driver for Basketball and Mara Lunsford, who ran the Asheville Folk Festival, and he knew countless old ballads. He was in old fiddle styles, and Walt Davis, an old Appalachian musician, that he traveled by 1930 when they recorded Corrine Corina, the white hillbilly version of Corrine Corina that everyone lifted, sold millions of records. He learned it from black folks, but he played for 15 years with towns without radios, and incredible. Up to today, Martha Spencer, who's from Southwest Virginia, a wonderful fiddle player, and her family's been in that Southwest Virginia for, it says white people have been there, and her family's still there. She carries on her family's musical traditions. There's a young songwriter named Alexa Rose that has a great record out on Big Legal Mess, is a great songwriter. My friend Dave McGrew and Larry Shores and my brother Paul were all fruit tramps, and great, like, wrote songs on the Woody Guthrie tradition about life on the road and picking fruit, and just in what those guys were thinking about. So, you know, we always have a white minority we're working on with, you know, and so, and it's all part of the same pot. It just, yeah, I just happen to just have a big love for R&B and blues. There's Dave.
Yeah, it is all part of the same pot.
Yeah, he has a great song called DOC Man, which I wish someone should. It's just incredible. And
DOC.
DOC Man. It's on his last record he did. If Johnny Cash was alive, he would have covered it for sure.
Doc, man.
Yeah.
Oh man. Now let's talk for a minute about hang on a second. There's a note that I was looking for that I had here. Oh, sorry. Give me a second. I'm not meaning to bore everybody, but I had a note here for something I wanted to ask Tim about tonight. And I don't want to let my chance go untaken. Now, one of the things that I've learned about you guys is that a lot of the times when you find a new artist, right?
Yeah.
And you'll take them out on tour and do, whatever you plan to do with them. For many of them, it's their first time, like, ever leaving the United States. And for many of them, it's sometimes leaving their own county, right?
Yeah. I wish I was a filmmaker to see the transformation of taking maybe like Cootie Stark, who was a blind street musician from Greenville, South Carolina, and living in a lower income housing, and taking him to Lincoln Center, or taking Dr. Byrd from Birmingham, who never really even played professionally in his town, to opening for in Australia at Byron Bay with Creedence Clearwater Revival, with John Fogerty, opening up for John Fogerty, and getting up in front of 10,000 people and just walking up on stage, and people looking at him and standing up and giving him a standing ovation before he even played.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't even nervous. Looked like they were just born to do it. I would be a nervous wreck just watching them. There's Cootie at Newport, just killing it. And they get in front of these stages, and they've been wanting this opportunity since they were kids. It just took, they worked on the music from 15 years old, and it was not till they're 75 till they got their opportunity to go do that. So they're ready.
Well, and they have a certain fearlessness, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's like, when you look at it, they so many of these people have been through so much hardship in their lives that, stepping on an airplane is something they can figure out to do.
That is fearlessness. And like, it's something that inspired as you get older to, we collect more things, how we take care of our things, and who's going to take care of our things when we go somewhere, and get fretted. These guys not worrying about that,
Right.
Cootie had some great things. The guitar will make you wander. The music will take you all over the world. And it's true. Any passion, if you have a purpose, I think it doesn't have to be music, but if a person has focus on a purpose, it's going to do something, and life's going to unfold. And it's wonderful being around musicians that see that.
Yeah.
And when the opportunity arrives, like Leroy, when he didn't know us,
yeah,
and he hasn't met us, and he trusted us to say yes to go on a show. And I haven't met him. He hasn't met us. We talked to each other on the phone, and checked each other out. But there's the element of trust, and that goes back to essence. We have to learn to trust and love one each other,
I want to ask you a quick question here. So much of this work over the years has required you and Denise, your wife and co-founder, and other people who've been on the staff of Music Maker, to talk to and connect with people who are much older than you, people who are, not at all close to your generation. And have you always found it easy to do that? Is that something that always came natural to you?
I think for me, and when I started this work when I was in my 20s, now I'm pushing 60. So it was, but it's something I always revered. My grandparents, always liked my grandparents, and I love all these elderly musicians. And if you want to learn, I was never, popular culture never did very well with me. I never understood it. So I was always trying to find the oldest person that learned from the oldest person. And we're such a new country. Things are, 100 years ago is nothing. Like in in Ghana, they can trace back their family 800 years. So 100 years is nothing. So it's not easy to find the old music here, you know.
Right. Well, we're hearing from the folks who are over on YouTube watching this.
Oh, cool. YouTube.
Yeah, the folks over on YouTube are saying, we love Dr. Byrd. Talk more about Dr. Byrd. So why don't you tell them about Dr. Byrd?
Dr. Byrd was from Birmingham, and we had met him through Adolphus Bell. Adolphus Bell was a one-man band. My wife and I were driving back from Louisville, Kentucky, and we saw a band that said, anyways, we met Adolphus Bell. He became famous, went around the world. And then he introduced us to Dr. Byrd. And Dr. Byrd was a very slim guy, stood close to 7 feet tall, and never played out of his community, but had a wonderful voice and a great primitive guitar style. And he had been part of those, those marches. His mom was very friends with Coretta Scott King, and he took nonviolence courses in the late 50s, early 60s, and actually organized marches. And in Detroit was organized a march, and he was shot, missed his head, went to his hand. He was involved in a racially motivated incident and spent 5 years in the pen in Birmingham. And so that did affect on him. But when we released his record, everywhere we went, people, when he would walk on stage, Lincoln Center, Europe, they would just stand for him and applaud. And there was some wonderful picture that I took, and that he became very popular in France. He had a great record in France of a song he wrote, "What can an old man do but sing the blues?" What a great question. And the French really grabbed onto that. And in Montpellier, they started doing street art on subway, on train cars, on walls. And then he actually went into a cultural center there, and the curator said, "Look on the ceiling." And he looked up the ceiling. There was a photo I took. They mounted on the ceiling. They said, whenever they walk into here, they have to look up to you, Dr. Byrd. And that really impressed Dr. Byrd. And that impressed me, that impressed him so much. And so that he was my inspiration to make my photography better, so I can get the pictures of these people into museums. Because I wasn't hip to the fact they wanted their faces on museums. And I knew, luckily I was a good enough photographer to be able to figure that out. And so so they love, so he got the mission, he really got it. And I think later in his life, he really felt he achieved something that he always wanted to do.
Yeah. Another person I want you to talk about, just because I feel like I haven't heard enough stories about him, is Captain Luther Meyer.
Yeah, Luther Meyer was the second artist we met. I met him like 3 days after I met Gabe, and we went up there, and there's this great cassette called Toot Blues, and we walked up and threw some mics down and recorded this cassette, the song Careless Love. He had a great contrabass kind of voice, deep, rich voice, and he was a Buddha of a man. He had known nothing but brutal hard work. Came up in the farms in South Carolina when Scarlet Fever came around. It killed most of his family, and he moved to Winston-Salem, and this hard work. Then he was Guitar Gabriel's wingman, and they played all the drink houses in the 60s and 70s and 80s till I met him. And he was the kind of my muscle going into all those drink houses, because we have a gig and we couldn't find Gabe, and we always have to go to a rougher section of the ghetto to find him, and Luke knew how to talk away and navigate the city. But he was just a wonderful guy. We traveled throughout South America, all throughout Europe, all throughout the States. I thought he was a younger man when I met him. I think he was like 56 when I met him. And he lived to be 90. And and he just loved life, and he loved people. And I remember a lot of these guys, because I've spent a lot of times with these folks in the final days, is the total these deep Christians that have absolutely no fear of death. They almost embrace it. They have not a wince of it. And I remember they were at the in his last days, he was at a hospice center and in a lot of pain with the cancer, and they asked him what he wanted to do. And he said he wanted to go home and have a crap game. And his family said no, and the hospice said no, that's what we'll do. And they set him up at a home with a bed, and he got his old lieutenant, one of his friends, and they started a 24-hour card game and cigarettes and music, and got a phone, and we spread out on the newsletter and all of Violet's if he wanted to take calls from his fans, and he took calls from people for weeks. I think he had his own wake before he died. He had like a 6-week party, till he passed, and I never saw that before. But anyways, I love Luke, and him and Michael Bine, we created this. We did a lot of heavy lifting together, and he made a lot of great friends, and he had a lot of fans around the world that just loved him, and women loved him. I mean, they were knocked out by his voice. His version of Poke Salad Annie and Stillwater Run Deep, steal it from Brooke Bennett. Brooke Bennett doesn't have a candle on Captain Luke's interpretation of the songs.
That voice is unlike anything I've ever heard.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's like hot chocolate on honey or something,
Yeah.
Honey on hot chocolate. That's what Todd would say. Those are the kind of places we would play, and that was our office for many years. That was Ezel's Drink House.
Well, we've got another question from over on YouTube, which is, how often do you do live streams like this one?
This is our first one, right? I think.
Some were done with musicians, I think.
Oh yeah. Well, this is something we need to do more of. Nick Lossett and decided we should do it, and I think it's a great idea. Any way we can reach people is a good way to reach people, especially during Omicron and all this stuff when you're afraid to go visit people.
Yeah. Okay, our friend Leo Gabriels is asking for a story about Eddie Tigner.
Eddie Tigner, man, what a character. I grew up, and I think it's funny, back in the days, every hotel had a lounge, and a lounge had a lounge act. Mm-hmm. And Eddie Tigner was one of these guys, and there was a group called the Ink Spots. It was a huge group. It was a vocal group with Bill Kennedy and stuff, but it's the most multi-copied group. There's actually hundreds of Ink Spots groups going on in the country. The founders actually went to court in New York and tried to stop those people from being Ink Spots, but the federal judge decided the Ink Spots had came into public domain and they couldn't. It got so successful. It's like the Beatles losing the control of the name the Beatles, the Ink Spots. But Eddie was enlisted in World War II, and he was enlisted with crazy people, Les Paul and T-Bone Walker, two of the greatest musicians, and he was just the booking guy. And he went back to Atlanta and learned how to play the piano, and stayed friends with the Ink Spots, and became friends with the agent. And he toured, going back to what I was talking, all these Holiday Inns. There's not one Holiday Inn or Army base, especially Army base in the United States that he didn't play. And after 35 years, he retired, and he was feeding kids in a cafeteria. And my friend Mudcat from Atlanta, a great blues musician, introduced me to him. And Beverly Guitar Watkins used to play with him. Albert White used to play with him. And he's another guy that if you listen to his version of Route 66, it's absolutely the best version of Route 66 ever recorded, bar none. No one's heard of it. We always try, but just check it out. He is this, and he was like a little elf. His nickname was Elf. We called him the little elf. He stand about 5'2", and he just smiled all the time. And one of the guys that he never had any anxiety. And I asked him about it. Even when his wife died, he wasn't sad. I said, Tim, I just don't have it. I don't get sad. And you believed it. He was just always happy and always smoking a cigarette, but he lived to 90 something, smoking the whole time.
Wow. Well, okay. I don't know if you would want to answer this one or not, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay, good.
In all these experiences that you've had, close relationships with all these really creative people, you got to assume that many of those experiences were very profound for you.
Yes.
So I'm curious if you would mind telling all of us, like, what's the most emotional moment you've had in the 28 years of Music Maker?
Emotional.
Yeah.
It's always, you always think of, the first cut's the deepest sometimes, when I recorded Two Blues with guitar Gabriel, and he let me play, and I never really played much blues guitar, but I actually laid down this killer track that still holds up. I don't even know how I did it. I think I was just with him, and he wanted me to do it, and I did it. So those otherworldly experiences always blow me away. When I met Freeman Vines, the guy did all these guitars, and you come into someone's space and you see these guitars that are just all laying on the grass and hanging around, and you're like, I knew my life was changed just by getting out of the car. And it has changed. I met all these people, had exhibits and learned so much from this guy. Had one of the greatest friends I ever had. And that's the amazing thing, is the amount of, to me, all the incredible close friendships I've had with amazing artists that just continues. And I've had other friends, or I've heard other scholars, people, they'll have an experience like that, and when it's over, they lock the door for that to happen again, and they just kind of don't think that will happen again in your life. But you just have to keep open, and there's always something. You never you haven't seen what hasn't passed you yet. You just don't know what's around the corner and who you're going to meet and how they're going to turn you on. But emotional, I've had a couple nervous breakdowns traveling with a blind guy and a one-armed guy, and a complete breakdown and uncontrollable tears. I've been through that too. I think we all do, but I have less of those now. But when you're building something and you don't have the finance or the know-how, sometimes it gets pretty frustrating.
Well, I think that we have gotten near the end of this. We want to thank everybody in the audience who has you guys have been great. You've asked the most amazing questions, and
thank you so much for joining us.
And we love you to pieces. And before we end, we're going to take them out with a video of the Music Maker Blues Review playing. And until the next time,
Thank you,
We'll see you
Chuck.
later.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Tim.
Supporters. Really appreciate all of you so much. Are we still on?
There we go.
Thanks, Chuck.
Somebody love me, just don't know who it is. I said somebody love me, just don't know who it is. I've been waiting a long time